I don't like that at all.
Preserved freshness.
I don't like it one bit. You know what's even weirder is it was sitting there and I did the touch test where I touched it and it felt like it might have been actually poop in there.
Yeah.
You know? And then it wasn't, and it was really upsetting. Also, in case you guys care, they now have 0 sugar Baja Blast. Pumped on it. Delicious.
He's getting violent, but like the other day my mother-in-law was at home and he started like crawling and growling, you know.
Mm-hmm. Over what? Do you know? Like what was happening?
Nothing. She just walked in and
Oh, so she like walked in the house and he started doing it. And you were home?
I was not. My wife. My wife was home.
How was he with your wife?
He's pretty good.
Do you listen to her?
Not as much as he does to me, but
okay.
You think that's the problem?
Well, it could be some of it, right? So when you're dealing with a lot of these like working breeds and like power breeds and stuff like that, it's like there's like a constant power vacuum at all times. You know what I mean? Where like they constantly, like if they don't see somebody like literally in the presence of them that is like in control of things, they are going to fill that void very quickly. You know what I mean? So like my Malinois, for example, same deal, working breed and stuff like that. Before he developed like a really good relationship with my wife, he kind of acted funny when I wasn't home as well. You know what I mean? And it was just something, we'll walk over this way real quick. You know, it was just something where she kind of had to take the reins on just kind of keeping him in check a little bit, like when I wasn't home as well, until he started kind of seeing her the same. And now, you know, if a guest comes in or whatever it may be, she'll put him into a downstay while they come in and make sure that he holds it and stuff like that. And she'll discipline him for things and stuff like that. And there's no issues. You know what I mean? Like she could have him out when guests and stuff are over and stuff. So I would probably recommend, you know, I don't know, like I said, how much she does with him, how much she interacts with him and stuff outside of just hanging out with him at home, but maybe try to get her, you know, working some downstays or working some sit stays and starting to use the e-collar a little bit with him and stuff to see if you could start getting that kind of same effect, you know?
For sure.
In the car, it's bad. When we took him to Oktoberfest when he was a puppy. And he did
try to do the wiener dog racing with him?
So good.
Yeah.
Did you do the racing with him?
No.
Oh.
No.
We didn't race him, but we want to this year.
Yeah.
If we were to take him there now, he would completely freak out.
Yeah.
But it's mostly like at home.
Yeah.
When we're on walks sometimes, it just kind of depends. He'll growl, like lunge towards people and other dogs.
Sure.
And especially like when we're in the car and he just sees somebody like
Yeah.
in another car, he'll like freak out.
Okay.
So there's really, I don't see a rhyme or reason. He kind of just
I understand, yeah.
chooses.
Well, you can definitely tell he's anxious, right?
Yeah.
And that's typically the stem of all of this kind of stuff is they get really, really anxious, and usually due to whatever, some way that we're socializing them or something we're doing or not doing with them, we see it start escalating into this kind of like outburst, like display of aggression, right? That's coming from the anxious place, but because of, you know, something that we're doing or some way we're communicating with him or something is making him feel like he needs to do that, obviously. So we try to get to the root of, obviously, one, helping him work through those anxieties, and two, helping you guys understand what he's gonna need from you to feel more safe, right? What's the extent of his socialization right now with like dogs and people? If any?
Pretty minimal. I mean, with other people, he doesn't really get to, just because now we're at the point where I try to keep him away.
Yep.
Because he has like snipped out like family members and stuff.
Sure.
Other dogs, mostly just little dogs, he's cool with.
He's good with them?
Dogs his other side, yeah, his size. So bigger dogs though, he gets very nervous and will, you know, step back, start barking,
Sure.
growling.
And when you were socializing him more, were you primarily doing it out on the walk on the leash, or were you doing it in situations where he was like actually off leash, able to like run around and play and stuff, or?
No off leash.
No off leash, so it's primarily on leash.
On leash, yeah.
Okay, so in a lot of cases, that's the reason why we'll see this stuff really start to escalate, right? So if you look at, you know, whatever, a puppy that may be really scared of other dogs or really scared of other people, right? If they're socializing in a natural setting, which is they're off in an area, they're free to move around, stuff like that, if they're scared of something, 9 out of 10 times they're just gonna move away from it, right? They're gonna start learning that moving away, creating space helps make them feel more safe and secure, right? The problem I see a lot of people do is they get a new puppy and they're constantly introducing them to other dogs or other people on leash, or people are coming up to them, things like that, and they're nervous, and because they're on this leash, even though they technically can get 4 feet away, 5 feet away, stuff like that, they feel trapped, right? So every single time that they get, they're in a situation where they're socializing and they feel insecure, flight is not an option, right? So what does that leave? Fight, right? So you start seeing that they learn that barking, growling, biting, snapping, things like that creates the creates the space and helps them feel more safe because they can't get away in the first place. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where a lot of this behavior like stems from in the first place 9 out of 10 times when we're dealing with nervous dogs, right? So as we start to work through these things, obviously you guys have pretty much eliminated all of the socialization to begin with, which is obviously the necessary step, obviously, to make sure we're not making anything worse. But long term, one of the big rules that we have is just on-leash greetings is always a huge no-no, right? So even when we get to a place where you guys start socializing him, and we give them social outlets and stuff like that, we're gonna wanna set them up in a way where it's gonna be kind of conducive to good socialization, and make sure while he's on the leash, he just starts realizing, we've got you, we're gonna handle these things for you, we're gonna make them go away so you don't feel like you need to do it yourself, right? Past that, a couple other tips and tricks for things. When we're going into new environments and stuff, especially since obviously he's a nervous dog, you wanna avoid keeping him on your lap. So that's another huge one where, again, that is very similar to the leash where they feel like they can't get away from things, but worse because they're literally in one spot and they're backed up against you, which is the ultimate safe spot, and they're kind of restrained and stuff too, so you're gonna see a lot more growling and barking and stuff. Listen, I don't care if you guys are hanging out at home watching TV and stuff, he's up cuddling with you, I have no problem with any of that, but if you're gonna have guests come over the house, right, or you're going to any sort of new place or something, you wanna just kind of have him on the ground like you have him right now, where he can move around, he could start to explore a little bit and sniff and stuff like that.
Cool.
So, okay, so what I want to do today is I want to see how he does with just working with me in general. I want to see where he's at with the leash stuff and see what our next steps we want to do with him are going to be. Before we get started, you guys have any big questions on anything I can answer for you?
I do have one question.
Yep.
So we have about half an acre in our backyard, and he likes to run, and we have a fence, and every house has like dogs. He freaks out, like to the point where I have to like
Yeah.
steer him away from the fence.
Sure.
Over time with this training, will that like?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just need to get a little bit more communication on him, right? So right now we're kind of starting to shape all of the foundational things we need. We still need to teach our markers, our good and our no, obviously. Once we have those things established, we can start communicating those boundaries, right? So, you know, if there's, when I used to live on the east side, I was in a similar situation where it's like neighbor here, neighbor here, neighbor here, all of which had dogs, all of which were horribly misbehaved, right? So when I first moved into that house, my dogs were a little agitated by what was going on around them, and I just needed to teach them whatever they're doing, you gotta ignore anything going on outside of the fence right now, right? So yeah, we'll get to that for sure.
Sounds good.
Cool, take the leash from you. All right, big man, come on. So real straightforward, no huge expectation of him to start. I just wanna get him moving with me. I feel like he's like extra long in comparison to some of the
I swear he keeps getting longer.
some of the weenies that we work with. It's funny, you would never imagine like when you get them, but like the breed in general can be a very feisty breed.
He literally will snip at me.
Yeah. Like if you look at like what they were like bred for, like kill small animals in holes, you know?
He loves digging.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's the other concern. He likes to chase like birds and squirrels.
Yep. He's got a high prey drive. Same deal, those types of things we could get better control over as well. Come on.
He keeps looking back at me.
There we go. Good. So just looking to see him kind of stay in my space here. Good job. Do you guys live around here?
We're in Brunswick.
Brunswick?
Yeah.
Nice. And is he's your only dog?
Yes. Yeah, I think I'm able to live with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do want another one though.
Yeah.
We gotta get this.
Good work, buddy. Not too shabby.
So out of curiosity, how long will we be using the prong collar for?
The prong we use usually for the first half of the program. Then once we transition to the e-collar, then we fade on to just like a regular collar.
I actually have a question regarding that.
Yep.
So this Saturday, we're actually going to a Wiener Dog Festival.
A Wiener Dog Festival.
So we're gonna take him,
Okay.
but it's like, do I just put him in a regular collar, or do I, because the prong collar you want to use for like training sessions, obviously.
Sure. Explain this festival to me.
It's in Kent, it's at a park, it's more like a picnic, and it's
Yeah.
just a bunch of wiener dogs, and then you just have like tents and stuff.
Sure.
So just like,
Bunch of people that have them just go hang out kind of thing. I understand. Okay.
or is it like not a good idea?
Well, so here's the thing, right? That's why I asked, right? So it's not that I have a problem with those types of things. I take my dogs to, you know, different busy parks, busy public settings, things like that, right? My issue with some of those types of festivals is, right, we know, right, the stem of a lot of his issues right now is him not feeling safe around people and dogs, right? Because they're constantly coming up to him, coming into his space, right? We also know, right, like we talked about at the beginning of the session here, one of our biggest rules from now to the future, right, is that no other dogs or no other people should be greeting him on leash, right? So you could take him there, I don't care, but can you still follow those rules when you're there? That's the question, right? And especially when you look at the purpose of a festival like that, typically speaking, I'm generalizing here obviously, right? When you look at the purpose of one of those festivals, it's literally for a bunch of people that freaking love these dogs to go there and just smother every single one of them that they see with love and affection, right? And for everybody to be like, oh, look, you got a wiener dog, let's let him meet this, that, you know what I mean? It's literally for the purpose of pretty much doing all of the things that you shouldn't be doing. So again, I don't have an issue with you going, right? But if you go, it's kind of one of those things where like, how good is your ability to resist peer pressure from the standpoint of you're gonna have to be saying no a lot while you're there. You know what I mean? So it's your call, right? Like you can take them, and exposure stuff is great. Like going places where there are a lot of things like that is typically good for dogs. You know what I mean? But you just can't have any of that kind of stuff happen. So your call.
I'm glad I asked. I had a feeling.
Yeah. That's the dicey part when you get into stuff like this is, you know, like, and then, you know, you get the pressure of like, you know, everybody that's there that has them typically thinks they're like an expert of that breed. You know what I mean? So it's like, then you start getting the, oh, he's scared. Oh, I know how to make it better. And then they come over and they try to give you their 2 cents and stuff like that. And, you know, again, you run into all these uncomfortable conversations where like, oh, all he needs is for me to give him a bunch of treats. It's like, actually, no, that's the opposite of what he needs right now. So. Okay, to answer your original question though, as far as collar choice and stuff, moving forward, anytime he's on a leash, you're just gonna have him on this collar. So if you're taking him somewhere, like a public setting or something like that, you're gonna have him on this one. Bed.
Isn't it you can have it on for like up to an hour, or is it?
Oh, this one can be on as long as you want. The only thing is you don't want it on if he's not on a leash, right? So you don't want it on while he's just loose in the house and stuff like that.
Cool.
The only one that has like a time limit to it is the e-collar, and it's not even a time limit, it's just if it's on in one spot for like hours and hours and hours, it'll cause irritation from the contact points because it's a lot tighter than this one is, right? So you just have to kind of rotate it around the neck and stuff. Good job, buddy. All right, we'll do 2 more of these. Okay.
See, we like doing that stuff too, because like,
Sure.
it's all the wiener dogs, and he gets along with every wiener dog he meets.
Yeah.
So I find there's like an opportunity for him to,
Yeah. It's just, here's the thing, right? Like, again, I'm glad he likes it. That's great, And listen, if we got some wiener dogs we could set up play dates with, hell yeah, I'm all for it, right? It's just you don't want to be looking at those types of situations as your socialization. At least you don't want to look at it as your dog and people socialization, right? Places like that, or this festival thing this weekend and stuff like that, that's great environmental socialization. So everybody thinks there's just dog and human socialization. There's environmental socialization as well, meaning getting your dog used to being around new things without needing to interact with them, right? And that's what's so great about those settings, is because there's so much crap going on, and the dog is learning to see it and not feel stressed out about it because it's not interacting with him, And that helps them gain trust in us and see us like, oh, they have control over what's going on around them. You know what I mean?
So, moving forward, is it more towards like when we transfer to the e-collar where it's going to help with the excessive barking?
Yeah, yes. So when you get into like the specific behavioral issues you're having, right? Excessive barking, digging, whatever, stealing things he's not supposed to, any number of those types of things. The training helps get the dog into a better state of mind overall, right? Which helps reduce those things a little bit, but not eliminate them, obviously. Because obviously through all the things we're doing right now, we're gaining some degree of compliance out of him, which helps him not be as pushy, right? Once we have the e-collar established, it's not that we can't correct those things without the e-collar, but it makes it easier to catch them and correct for them, right? It's just an easier to use tool for you guys.
Yeah, this is going to sound so bad, maybe not, but when he's barking, it's so bad I spray him with a water bottle.
That doesn't sound bad at all. Does it stop it? Yeah. Does it stop it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, so that's what I meant about, like, you could stop some of these behavioral issues without it. The key is just understanding how to consistently attach that consequence to behavior. So for example, let's say he's motivated by the spray bottle. It sounds like he doesn't like it, right? Now the key for actually totally stopping that behavioral issue is consistency and not missing your opportunity, right? A lot of people, if that spray bottle isn't like in your hands, you feel like there's no way you're going to be able to address the problem, which is not true. That's why we use markers, right? So let's say we're hanging out, this is the living room, right? And he starts, that's the window there, and he runs over, he starts barking at something. And the spray bottle is like all the way in that other room there. He's barking right now, bark, 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 bark. I could mark with no, so I could tell him no, right? And I don't expect that he stops when I say no, but what my no does is basically take a picture of what he's doing in that moment, right? So I've taken a snapshot of that picture, so I can then take my time, and get my spray bottle, and he's still barking over there, and I don't need to say no again because I already said it one time, and I go over, right, and I give my spray for it, right? And as long as I follow up and I get the spray bottle and I still give that correction for it, and I do that every single time he starts doing that behavior, it will stop. Where people make the mistake is they say no, right? And then if the dog stops, they don't give the correction for it, right? And they wind up just kind of interrupting the behavior. Or they say no and they spray one time, and then the next time they say no and they don't spray, and then the next time they say no and spray, and then the next 2 times they don't spray, and there's no consistency to the correction, right? So in order for a correction or an inhibition to be created for a behavior, it has to be completely predictable to the dog. Every single time I do this, this thing happens. Regardless of, let's say in that sequence where this was in that room and I said no when he was barking, let's say he stops, right? And I go get the spray bottle and he's no longer even near the window. He's all the way over there, right? If I've said no while he was rehearsing the behavior, I would still go find him wherever he is and give my spray for it, and he'll still know that correction was for whatever he was doing when he heard no, which allows us to maintain the consistency, right? So that's one adjustment you can make right off the rip that probably, if he does actually care about this, will probably get you some headway with it. The only issue with like spray bottles and stuff like that is not that they don't work, because for some dogs they work very effectively, but because they work off of like a startle effect, you know, it startles them. It's not pain, you know, it's not like it's anything that like is painful or this or that, right? Because it startles him, the effect of it startling him can wear off sometimes. You know what I mean? And then the spray bottle just loses its value. And then you spray him all day long and you're just like, well, I don't really care about this anymore because it doesn't startle me anymore, you know? Where you get into something like an e-collar, obviously an e-collar is uncomfortable. That's the reason why it works. So that doesn't really wear off. You know, every single time he does that behavior, something uncomfortable happens. It's not like he's just gonna get used to that, you know? He's doing well though.
Yeah,
He's doing very well. Why don't you do one more of these?
Okay.
Nice.
Man, so we must have screwed up last night when we were on our walk and we let him see Nate's mom's dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, and technically speaking,
She approached us.
Yeah, and technically speaking, even if it's a dog that he likes, we still don't want it to happen, because what happens if he likes the dog is it's not fight or flight so much, but what happens is we create this conditioned association of if you see something you like, get really excited and start pulling and barking towards it. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Yeah, so when we're walking around the block, we'll have to like maybe go a different route. Because there's that little teacup he likes. There's the other leader dog he likes.
She didn't go up.
You could still go the same route. The biggest thing is just, you know, like if the person says, hey, you know, whatever, they want to let the dog come up to him, hey, sorry, we're training right now, you know? Just let them know, hey, we started a new training program, blame it on me. Our trainer's an asshole and said that he can't say hi to you anymore.
That's what the no treat rule.
Yeah. It's a little folded paws, look at that.
It's so cute.
It is.
You'll get comfortable, right?
All right, go ahead and let him hang out.
You still let him hang out?
Yeah, just let him hang out. He looks pretty good. I mean, he seems like he's taking to things pretty well.
I'm shocked.
The leash stuff does not look too bad at all. Yeah, and this kind of stuff, if you're in a new place and he starts trying to jump up to you, just ignore him for now. Later on, unless we're inviting him up, we would correct for that. Yep.
So ever since he was a puppy, I just pick him up.
It's a hard habit to break for sure, especially when you have little dogs, but it's so important, you know?
It makes me feel safe when I pick him up.
Of course it does. Yeah. But in like an unhealthy way, you know what I mean? Because right now he wants to feel safe because he's overwhelmed and stressed out by everything here. But we need for him to start feeling confident enough to go explore this kind of stuff, you know? And if we're holding him constantly, he'll never get past that hump. So the first step is him realizing, oh my gosh, I'm stressed out. I want mom to pick me up here right now, but she's not doing it. What the heck, right? And we have to let him get past that. From there, you'll start noticing him go check other things out and start being a little bit more of a dog, you know? So we want to position him just like we're seeing right now. See, now he's like, oh, okay, cool, maybe I'll go sniff around, you know? We want to start seeing him do more of that. You know, that's the big goal with this right now. So a couple big things here over the course of the next week that I want you guys to work on with him. So one, the holding, like I said, if you guys are just home by yourselves and you're cuddling with him, this, that, I don't care. But if anybody's coming over the house, if you're in any sort of new environment, this, that, he's got to be on the floor right now, right? That's a huge one. That's going to get you a lot of progress. Thing number two, anytime he is on a leash, no more dog or human socialization, right? You could take him to these places, like I said, I don't care as long as you feel like you could set those boundaries appropriately. Taking him to those places is going to be totally fine, but you can't have those on-leash interactions anymore. We'll get into adding interactions back in a more natural way, right? Like when he's off leash and stuff like that, but we got to get a little bit more training on him first for that. I want to see his bed stay starting to look really good. And if you start noticing he's getting anxious in the house or something like that, that's a great time to start working that. Pop that leash on, pop that collar on, work a couple of bed stays with him and give him some direction, give him something to do, you know? Okay, so obviously you did a little bit of e-collar training with him here.
What do you use it for typically at this point? To be completely honest with you,
Yep.
to get the attention in high stress situations.
Yep.
And a lot of the times what it's turned into is almost, I hate to say it, but almost punishment in a way.
That's fine.
And
I mean,
and I don't mean,
it's a use of it.
I
Yeah.
don't mean it like, hey, you're bad, I'm
Sure.
going to e-collar or do it. It's,
Yeah, yeah.
hey, he's doing something bad right now.
Yep.
I don't have this near me. So it's almost like, oh, I need to go run, find that because you're doing something bad.
Sure.
And then do that.
But he usually wears the collar most days.
Yeah.
Yep.
Most days, and like usually we try to buzz him when he's barking.
Yep.
And say quiet. And then when we go on walks, which if he's barking or
Sure.
to heel, like he doesn't really heel.
Yeah.
And then usually like, I know like when we were trained, you were supposed to click him to sit and like lay down and stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, I usually don't click him because he listens to
Yes.
being clicked.
So there's a lot of philosophies with e-collar training, obviously, right? Like it's another one of those tools where it can be used a lot of different ways, obviously, right? As far as, one of the uses is as punishment. Now, punishment doesn't, I think there's like kind of like a negative connotation with that word sometimes where it's like this bad thing, where all punishment is obviously adding a consequence in for non-compliance of something the dog knows what to do, right? So punishment could be you tell him sit, he doesn't sit, we give a correction for it. That would be the implementation of punishment for not sitting, right? Punishment could be he's barking out the window and we give a correction for that to get him to stop doing that. That would be considered punishment, right?
That's how it's been.
Yeah.
It's usually, I'd say 80%
Yeah,
of our time.
which is completely fine, obviously, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And once we've trained the dog, right? Once we've checked the box, the dog knows what to do, we typically move to the avoidance stage of training, which is where we give punishment for not listening. You know what I mean? And the goal is that we don't have to give the punishment because the dog understands the boundaries, right? I think it's really the word that, people kind of like develop that negative association with, obviously, right? The other idea is like you were saying, like when you give your sit command, right? You're prompting with the command, right? Some people will call that like command amplification, right? Meaning that we give stimulation with the command to speed up the dog's response to the command. Now, that stage is typically in the early teaching stages of things, at least the way that a lot of people will use it. But once the dog understands the command, yeah, I mean, obviously if he's listening to the sit, I'm not gonna like tap while I'm giving the sit command, you know what I mean? I typically transition to just giving the correction if I need to, right? So it sounds like obviously at this stage, you're kind of just using it if he's, if you're asking him to do something, he's not doing it, you implement the e-collar for not doing it. Is that kind of correct?
We used to, back at our old house before the move, because this whole move thing is really new. It's
Sure.
in the last 3 weeks or so.
You guys just got here?
Just got here.
Oh, nice.
And well, he's obviously the parts of the family, right?
Sure.
So when he's uncomfortable, that was the first thing we did when we came up here.
Yeah.
Hey, we need to
Gotta get this under control.
Trust him, and if we don't trust him, it's not going to be a good situation for him.
100%.
We're going to lock him up and do that. And so
Yeah.
that was for us to get up here and do that. But before we moved up here, we would do training in our backyard. Sit. Let's see. We would do place. We would do crate. We would do heel.
Yeah.
All those little things. We would do that in our backyard. As
Sure.
training, and so he kind of saw it as training for a while. But
Yeah.
like I said, as of late, been more for training.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. All right, so so what I want to do here is I want to take a look at you working a couple of different commands with him, see how you're doing it currently, see how he listens to it, and kind of go from there. So I'm assuming he knows, does he know like a place command and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
He knows
cool.
Place, he knows crate. We do sit. Recently, which stinks, is that the way that we did training was sit was also stay. It
Yep.
was not. But recently, he likes to continue to move. So we've, out of the awful habit of just knowing what it means to us.
Sure.
We've used
Say stay.
We've said stay.
That's fine. Yeah.
So,
So we train the same way as it sounds like your other trainer from the standpoint, we don't really use a stay, just because like there's never a time you're gonna tell him place or sit or down or whatever, but get up whenever you want to. So it's just kind of redundant, Typically speaking, if we're finding us having a hard time with getting the dog to hold the position without stay, that just highlights there's some sort of communication issue, you know what I mean? Something about how we're trying to get him to do the command or enforce the command is sloppy and confusing him, more or less, right? So let's do this. Let's start with the place command. I want to see you try to do a couple place commands over there with him.
okay, do you want to take him off collar or leave him on?
However you typically would do it. I don't care.
So normally it would be off collar, but at the same time, I know the trust issues, I don't want to put him in danger here. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be petting him if he comes up to us. So however you want to do it, whatever's common for you.
Jax, please. Jax, please. Oh, come on, Jax, please. Good boy.
And when you were giving commands there, were you tapping while you were doing so, or okay?
That's how we were always
Sure.
training.
Yep.
It was always 3.
Okay.
It was whenever we were giving a command, it was 1, 2, 3, because we have it on So do you guys use dog tread?
E-collar tech, but I'm familiar with the collar.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we were told to use the mitt instead of the constant.
Yep.
And then do 3 taps was how we were doing. And so he starts usually at about 20, is about his number.
Sure.
But you know, something like this.
Yes.
You know, I'm in the 30s right now.
Yeah, understood. All right, well, let's do a couple more of those. Let's see how he looks.
Good boy. Jax, come. Jax, place. Place. Good boy, Jax, sit. Good boy. Stay. Jax, break.
Okay.
Jax, sit. No, sit. Good boy. Jax down. Good boy. No, down. Sit. Sit. Good boy.
And let's do one more place command here.
Okay, Jax, place. Place. Break. Good boy.
Okay, cool. You can let him hang out for a second. Okay, so first impression on all of that, he clearly knows this stuff, right? Like, you know, his general understanding once you got him into the place of staying there seemed fine, right? He sat when you asked him to sit, he downed when you asked him to down, right? That all looked pretty good, frankly, from an understanding of his point. Here's my issue, right? So, and I see this a lot with e-collar training, right? There's too much stim going on and it's confusing him. That's a lot of what I'm seeing right now. For example, the sit and the down right there, the predicting getting back into that sit and stuff, he's just trying to figure out how to avoid that correction. We're not giving him an opportunity to do it correctly. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't typically do the command amplification kind of style where I'm prompting with every single time I give a command, because I think you can kind of create a frantic dog with it. You know what I mean? Where they're just trying to like figure out, what do I do to avoid this pressure constantly? And they're not really processing what information am I being given. You know what I mean? Second thing that I'm noticing right off the rip here, you're moving really fast with a lot of your training, right? So it's like place, sit, down, this, that, right? We're doing a lot of different things, and he's never having a chance to kind of settle into the position and then be like, okay, cool, I did it correct. This is what he wanted me to do. Let's chill here for a minute. You know what I mean? So what we're gonna focus on here today with him is seeing, as we make a couple of tweaks to some of these commands, how does his behavior change overall, right? So let's do this. I'm gonna have you give me the e-collar remote, but I'm gonna have you work him. Yeah, Nick Button, he's on black collar.
He's in the black, yep.
Perfect. Okay, so we're gonna start with just the place command here right now, right? So no sit on place, no sits off of place or anything like that. Simply place command. We're gonna use the blue bed for this here, right? So what you're gonna do in a second here is you're gonna walk up to the place. When you get next to it, you're gonna give your place command one time, and then from there, just let it breathe for a minute, right? Don't rush into a correction or anything like that, obviously. You're just gonna give that place command, let it chill for a second, see what he's gonna do. If he kind of gets on and like sniffs his way onto the bed and stuff, I'm cool with that initially. When we generalize to a new place, like if I bring my dogs to a new place and I tell them place on something they've never placed on before, they're sniffing their way onto it also. You know what I mean? It's like a new thing. It's like there's been a gazillion dogs on this already today. I'm sure it smells pretty interesting, right? So we'll give him a chance to kind of figure it out. Once we've confirmed he's made a decision, if he's either gonna do it or he's not gonna do it, from there we'll either do our duration where we have him hold the position, or we'll give our correction at that point. And when we give a correction at this point, it's not gonna be just a tap, we're gonna pair in a no marker with that, right? So we're just gonna mark with no, we'll tap our button, then we'll give our command again after that. Does that make sense? So go ahead and walk him right up to there. Once you get next to it, give that place command, then just let it breathe for a minute.
Jax, place.
And just give it a second there. See what he's gonna do. And then in a second here, once he's confirmed to either doing it or not doing it, which I'd say he's probably not gonna do it at this point, mark with no one time.
No.
Then tell him place again.
Jax, place.
And then give him another second. Yep, you could fix your leash if you need to. And then give him a second. And then same deal, if in a minute here he confirms he's not doing it, you can mark with no again.
Jax, no.
And then tell him place again.
Jax, place.
And try to keep your tone really consistent and like non-emotional with it.
Jax, no.
And tell him.
Jax, place.
There we go, perfect. Cool. Now no stay or anything, just drop your leash and leave him there. Now same deal, if he were to get up at this point, we would mark with no, we would give our tap, and we would help him back, right? And what I want to see over the next couple repetitions here is if in between all this information that we're giving him that space, if he starts to process this and start thinking through it a little bit more on his own, right? So we'll give him a second there. So it looks like he's holding it pretty well. So you can go back. I want you to pick up your leash, but then just wait for a minute. Don't release him or anything yet. So anytime when we're doing duration, if we have a leash on him, I always pick up the leash and pause first before releasing to make sure he's not seeing me getting that leash as the cue to get up, right? So now he's staying there, so you could break him off. Perfect. Then let him hang out for a second here, and then you could walk him right back over, and then do it again. And as far as that pulling and stuff right there, I don't care about that right now. All I care about is the place command. Much better. Same deal, you can set your leash down and leave him there. Very good. Go ahead and go back. Pick up that leash and pause for a second. Mark with no. Then help him back on.
Chest, place.
Very good. Yep. We'll just do a couple of those. Right back to mom. Now, even though he got on his own, why don't you go ahead and give your place command still?
Chest, place.
Perfect. So I don't care if he beats you to it. We braked him off, meaning that there's no expectation. He's free. So if he gets on, totally fine. If I need him to stay there, I'm just going to still give that command, even if he's already on it. And then we'll do 2 more of these. Mark with no. Perfect. Two more. Very good. One more. Perfect. All right, looks much better. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is we're gonna work on a down stay with him. Now, I saw you working like sit and down a little bit. I don't get super crazy with sit and down, right? If you look at your stationary commands, whether it's a sit or a down position, the whole purpose of it is just to keep the dog in one spot, right? So because of that, like we're not training a competition dog here. Like he doesn't need to be all crazy alternating and stuff. And I find that sometimes if you work too much of that, especially when you're using a lot of pressure and stuff for it, you wind up just kind of messing up your sit and your down a little because they're constantly just like guessing which one they should be in. So we're gonna pick down and just work with that for right now, and just make sure that he's really good with just that command. So I want you to do the same exact process here where you're gonna pick a spot over there, you're gonna put him into a down, you're gonna give that command one time, let it breathe for a minute. At that point, if he doesn't do it, same process, we'll mark with no, give our correction, then repeat that down command.
And the first trainer that we did, they wanted to use something called puppy push-ups.
Puppy push-ups, yeah. Listen, you get back to like reward-based training. If I'm doing reward-based training and I want to teach fun things like that, it's fine because that's more of a trick, you know what I mean? But when you get into functional obedience and like I'm going to be correcting and like punishing the dog for not doing it, that kind of defeats the trick, fun, like mental stimulation aspect of it, you know? So. And give it a minute, see what he's going to do. And then while you're, there you go. And then same deal, give him another minute there, see what he's gonna do. Perfect. You know, sometimes like when we're dealing with a dog that gets easily distracted by stuff, like right there, he seemed like he was distracted by something going on in that room right there. Sometimes we could get just as distracted as the dog. It's like, oh my God, he's distracted. I need to tell him to do something else. Suppose, like I said, it's no big deal. I'm just focused on the task at hand here right now. And I'm gonna give him a minute, see if he focuses back in or not. From there, I'm just gonna correct for it all the same. So, and then same process here, if we were to break this command, we would mark with no, give our correction, then we would take him as close back to that same spot and put him back into a down position. Okay. So.
Yeah, he's, to your point, sometimes it's very, trying to understand what's going on,
yeah.
hyper aware.
Sure.
The other thing too is if we were to go behind us, behind that black screen,
yeah, out of sight and stuff.
All of a sudden he's gonna run up there trying to find the light.
Yep.
Catch no, catch down.
And give him a second. Excellent. So all we're doing right now is we're just creating a really, really consistent way of being able to enforce these commands. That's all I'm trying to just kind of pattern in with you guys right now. And what that'll do is that'll make it 10 times more consistent for jacks, right? And consistency is key. That's what helps them get to a place where they don't need the correction. You know what I mean?
You know, it's interesting because, and I really like this because even when we did our first training,
sure.
One of the things that we talked about was I got to a nervous point where no was never really brought up as a problem. Sure. You're doing it until you get the answer you want.
Yeah.
And so he never really knew what no truly meant. You know, so we were like leave it or off.
Sure.
It was never hey, you're doing something bad. It's leave that one distraction.
Yeah. And this is where, you know, I've, like over the years, just tried to simplify the program as much as possible to make it easier for the dogs and the owners, right? So like leave it and off and quiet and all of those different commands. I don't teach any of those because I know is kind of my universal, whatever you're doing right now, I just don't want you to do. So like, why do I need 17 different commands for it, right? And past that, again, it's a delicate conversation because it's not like I'm all for correcting, you know what I mean? Like that's what's gonna get you past a lot of these issues. It's just being a little bit more artful about how we're adding it in a way he's going to understand it better. Where you could get real caught up on just like jamming that button until you get compliance, and then you just confuse the shit out of the dog, you know? And what are some of your big issues? Like, what'd you come here for?
So originally, what happened was we were walking out of, I take him to Process Daycare.
Yep.
And this is the first time it's actually happened, but he lunged at someone and actually bit them. We were walking out and I like had a full meltdown about it.
I think I remember. I think I spoke with you over the phone about it.
Maybe, yeah. I cried for a long time about it.
Okay, yeah. I think I remember. Okay.
So, yeah, I was just like, who are you, you asshole? And
yeah, right.
Then I was like, let's do something about this. So, his big triggers that I notice are like, if the energy is wild around him, he's gonna be wild. So, like, my nephews were over this past weekend, and like, whatever they're doing, he wants to be right there with them, and they hate him. So, like, they just don't want him anywhere near him.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue, and I think just like, we don't want him to be reactive at
Sure.
all, really. Yeah, so he lunges usually at squirrels and bunnies and things like that, except for since we've just had these 2 sessions, he's been pretty good about that, actually.
Good. So it's improved, you would say?
Incredible, like
Okay,
max
awesome.
amounts.
Good, good, good. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, so, typically what I tell everybody is, you're going to see incremental progress over these first couple sessions, usually first 3 or 4. We're kind of building like the foundational steps we need to proof all this stuff. So today's going to be a lot of teaching still, still obviously, and we'll kind of see what we get with it and kind of plug away from there. So, as far as the walking is concerned, obviously it sounds like it's moving in the right direction. One thing to keep in mind, anytime we're working with dogs that have had whatever, a bite incident, a lunge incident, things like that, so you just always have to be mindful of space. You know what I mean? Especially as you're working through the training process, because just because he's walking a lot better than he was before doesn't mean he's not going to try to lunge at somebody still right now.
Right, he did that at my nephew.
Yeah, right. So we have to make sure that we're almost going into situations expecting for him to make the mistake, so we can be prepared to address it safely.
Yeah.
Right. That really is the key with it, because like he has to do it, and we have to be able to correct him for him to get past it. But knowing that he's going to do it at some point, we got to be mindful of, okay, cool. Like Paige is right there, and I need to walk by her. I'm not just going to go like. Right. You know what I mean? Like that would be stupid, right? Because like he's gonna, you know what I mean? Right? So if she's right there, I'm gonna create space. I'm gonna arc around, right? That way, my rule of thumb is if he were to lunge at whether it's a dog, whether it's a person, whether it's a squirrel, whatever it may be, I wanna make sure I'm just far enough away where he couldn't make contact with them, right? Additionally, obviously controlling things going on around him and stuff like that, and making sure that, okay, cool, if I'm hanging out outside, wherever, picking him up from daycare, this, that, and somebody's coming up and like, oh, that's a cute dog, right? Hey, don't do that, right? We proactively communicate that boundary before it's too late, before they hit a point where if he does lunge, he's gonna make contact, right? And it's kind of funny how it works. As we start creating those boundaries and as we start doing those types of things, what's gonna happen is his threshold to those things is gonna increase, because he's gonna start seeing that, oh wow, mom's handling these things for me, so I don't need to be so uptight to begin with. You know what I mean? So those are just a couple things to keep in mind, obviously, over the next couple sessions as we continue working through these things.
And that's helpful, because a lot of people do say, oh, cute dog, can I touch it?
Yup.
Like, or don't ask.
No retraining.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, I'll almost tell people sometimes, like, because sometimes, like, it's like people are like, for whatever reason, like, they don't even ask, right? They'll just like go and do it, right? So I'll like look at people and I'll be like, you look like you're gonna pet my dog, and I'll just tell them like, no, don't do it, right? Like, before they even think about it, I'm like, don't even get that thought in your head right now, right? So keep that in mind as well. More dogs than you would think have had bites before, and that's a big thing I think a lot of people need to hear sometimes. It's not that it makes it okay or that we want them to do it or anything, but it's not like just because your dog has a bite incident, they're like this horrible, aggressive dog.
Right. And I needed someone to tell me.
Yeah, it just doesn't, It's a reality check is what I tell everybody. It means something we're doing is wrong, right? And all it is just, hey, we got to figure out what do we got to do to make sure this doesn't happen again.